This is the sewing tutorial for the Greenstyle Auckland shorts. In this tutorial, I will be sewing the bagged pocket option for the front and one Welt zipper pocket in the back. Cut 2 P1 fronts mirrored. If sewing the optional bagged pockets, cut along the diagonal at the side seam. If sewing the optional zippered Welt pocket, mark your Welt pocket window on the front and cut the front P1 out to the corner. Cut 2 P2 backs mirrored. If sewing the optional zippered Welt pocket, mark the Welt pocket window on the right side of the right leg as worn. For a one-pieced waistband, cut 1 P3 waistband on the fold. For a two-pieced waistband, cut 1 P3A front waistband and 1 P3B back waistband on the fold. Be sure to mark the optional grommets if using. If sewing the optional front bag pocket, cut 2 sets of P5 mirrored. One set will have the diagonal line cut and one set will have the squared off corner. For the optional back Welt pocket, cut 2 P6. Mark the Welt zippered pocket outline window on one set. Making your own bias tape, cut a 12-inch or greater square piece of desired fabric. For the optional liner, cut 1 P7 on the fold and 1 P8 on the fold. Additional supplies required include number 3 zippers and fusible interfacing, 2-inch elastic for the waistband, optional grommets, interfacing pieces and cording, as well as 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch elastic for the optional liner. Begin with a square piece of fabric approximately 10 to 14 inches on each side depending on the amount of bias tape required. Cut in half along the diagonal. Place one of your new triangle pieces right sides down on the opposite piece. Align at the short ends of your triangle. Sew along the short end with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowance open and place your new parallelogram right side down. Starting at what will be the longer end of your triangle, mark a line 1 1/4 inch from the bottom of the fabric using a washable marker or chalk pen. Work your way from the bottom of the parallelogram up to the top, placing lines each 1 1/4 inch from each other. Fold the parallelogram right sides together, aligning the short ends. At this point, you'll have created a square with your marked lines running horizontally. To make the bias tape continuous, we need to offset the horizontal lines by 1. Grab the pointy ends of your parallelogram and pull in opposite directions to realign the lines. Pick up the short ends of your bias tape, pinching so right sides are together. Marked lines will need to cross over each other so that once you sew out the seam allowance, the line runs in a continuous spiral down the fabric. Pin in multiple locations. Sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. After pressing the seam allowance open, starting at either end, using scissors or rotary cutter, cut along your spiral line. To finish prepping your bias tape, we need to create 2 memory creases. Fold the bias tape nearly in half, wrong sides together. One side should be 1/8 inch taller than the other. Press with an iron. Fold the longer of your 2 sides in half again, wrong sides together. The raw edge will now align to your previously created memory crease. Press with an iron. The end result will have 2 memory creases, one nearly down the middle and one 1/4 inch from the raw edge. The process of installing a zippered welt pocket will be the same for both the front and back pocket. For this pair, I will be installing it on the back of the pants only. Iron a strip of fusible interfacing to the wrong side of your pant leg. Align around the welt pocket window marking. Place the corresponding welt pocket, either P4 or P6, that has the welt pocket window outline right side down atop the front leg. This piece will now be referred to as the welt pocket facing. The welt pocket window outline needs to be face up. Align the welt pocket window markings. Sew around the perimeter of the welt pocket using a straight stitch. Mark a line down the center of the welt pocket window, stopping 3/8 inch from either end. Extend a line from the end of your initial line out into the corners of the rectangle. Cut along your lines, careful not to cut into the stitch line. Push the pocket facing through the opening. With an iron, flatten all 4 corners to lay as flat as possible. To create optional zipper garages for your zippers, you will need 2 scrap pieces of fabric, approximately 1 3/4 by 1 inch each. To accurately place these zipper garages along the zipper, we need to measure the width of your pocket window. It will vary by size. Mark the width along the zipper, measure 3/8 inches in from each marked initial line, and place another notch. Fold the fabric in half, wrong sides together. Align the folded edge of your zipper garage to the innermost of the lines. Baste or hold in place with pressure tape. Center the zipper within the welt pocket window. Use pins or pressure tape to temporarily hold the zipper in place. With the right side up, top stitch along the bottom edge of your zipper with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Backstitch at the beginning and end of the stitch line. You will be sewing the pant leg and the welt pocket facing to the zipper. The pocket backing will not be in place at this point. Place the second welt pocket, now labeled welt pocket back, P4 and P6 respectively, on top of your welt pocket facing. Sew around the sides and bottom of the welt pocket with a straight stitch using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Finish the raw edges with a serger or desired method. Be sure to move the pant leg out of the way, catching only the pocket facing and back. Starting at one side, stitch up one side, across the top of your zipper, and back down the other side. Optionally baste stitch the pocket along the top of the shorts. Take your time and maintain a consistent 1/8 inch top stitch. From the bottom layer to the top, you're now sewing through the pocket back, the zipper, the pocket facing, and the pant leg. or shorts made with fabric that will likely grow on the bias with wear, you can optionally place a strip of fusible interfacing to the wrong side of your leg front P1. Place the bagged pocket cut along the diagonal marking, now referred to as the bagged pocket facing, right side together with a short front along the diagonal line. Sew with a straight stitch using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Flip the bag pocket facing to the wrong side of the shorts. Press the diagonal seam with an iron. Top stitch with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. With the shorts right side down, place the second bagged pocket of the set P5 with the squared off corner right side down on what will be the inside of your pocket, pinned around the edges. Sew the pocket facing to the pocket back, being sure to keep the pant leg out of the way as you sew. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a straight stitch. Finish the raw edge of the pocket with a serger or your preferred method. Place the constructed front right sides together with the constructed back aligning at the inseam. Using a straight stitch, sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Finish the raw edge with a serger or your desired method. Repeat with the other leg. With the shorts wrong side up, place the right side of the bias tape against the wrong side of the shorts. The side without the 1/4 inch crease will align with the raw edge of your shorts. To reduce bulk at the inner thigh, ensure that the inseam seam allowances face opposite directions when installing the bias tape. Use a 1/4 inch seam allowance and a straight stitch to sew the tape in place. A walking foot can be helpful for this step with slightly stretchy fabrics. Alternately, you can use a 2-thread change stitch on a cover stitch machine. Take your time and be very patient with this step, working only a few stitches at a time, especially on the curved portions of the hemline. You can choose to pre-pin all of your bias tape, but I personally find that simply holding the fabrics in place with my fingers is more successful due to the minute adjustments being made. For this step, you can sew with the bias tape on top or on the bottom as you look at your fabrics. My machine was creating a weird puckering, so I opted to put the bias tape on the bottom. If opting to use a cover stitch, place the bias tape on the bottom with the shorts on top so the looper threads are easily concealed as you roll the bias tape around the hem. Flip the shorts right side up. Fold the bias tape around the hem using the center crease as your guide. Fold the tape a second time along the 1/4 inch crease. This will fully enclose the raw hem inside the bias tape. Position the folded edge of the bias tape so it just covers the previous stitch line. Pin in place or finger press. Top stitch with a 1/16 inch seam allowance, making sure to cover the original stitch line underneath. Again, be patient and take your time. This step will go even slower than the previous step. Be sure to catch the bias tape at all points. You'll move 1 to 2 stitches at a time. Adjust your fabric, the sewing foot, or the needle as needed. A tool such as a purple thing can be helpful in holding the bias tape flat as you top stitch. Be especially patient around the curve at the side seam. Repeat for the other leg. Fold the leg right sides together, aligning down the side seam. Sew with a 3/8 seam allowance using a straight stitch. Finish the raw edge with a serger or using your desired method. Turn the leg right side out to top stitch down your seam allowance. For the zippered welt front pocket view, press the seam allowance to the front of the shorts. For the bagged pocket view, press the seam allowance to the back side of the shorts. Top stitch using a 1/8 inch seam allowance and repeat with the other leg. To sew the right and left leg together, turn one leg inside out. Slip the right side out leg inside the inside out leg. The fronts will be aligned, right sides together. The backs will also be aligned, right side together. Ensure that the inseam is nestled to be facing opposite directions. Align along the front and back crotch curve. Pin in multiple locations. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a straight stitch. And finish the raw edge with a serger or your desired method. Place the liner front P7 right side together with the liner back P8, aligning at both side seams and the crotch seam. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch or serger. Check the suggested elastic length against your personal body for personal preference. After adjusting the length as desired, overlap the short ends of the elastic and sew together with a straight stitch. For most ready-to-wear garments, the right side of the liner will be against the body, meaning the seam allowance of the liner will be facing the inside of the shorts. It's up to personal preference if you choose to do that for the Auckland shorts. If following the ready-to-wear design, place your elastic against the wrong side of the leg opening. The elastic will need to be stretched slightly around the leg opening. You want greater stretch across the back of the leg than the front. Pin in place in multiple locations. And sew with a stretch stitch or serger. Repeat for the other leg. Turn the elastic outwards towards the wrong side of the liner to fully encase the elastic. Top stitch with a stretch stitch or cover stitch. Place the assembled liner inside the assembled shorts, wrong sides together. The liner and shorts will align at the side seams as well as middle front and middle back. The liner will need to be stretched slightly to fit the opening of the shorts, which is slightly larger than the opening of the liner waist. Baste stitch around the opening using a straight stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. For optional grommets, iron a small strip of fusible interfacing to the wrong side of the waistband, centering over grommet markings. Install the grommets as instructed in the packet. Alternately, the buttonhole function on your sewing machine can be used to sew grommets. We will create 2 rows of memory creases in the waistband P3. Fold the waistband in half along the long edge wrong side together and press it with an iron. Fold the long end further away from the grommet notches if opting to use 3/8 inch toward the wrong side of the fabric. Again, press with an iron. Fold the waistband in half, aligning short ends right sides together. Your memory creases should align. Sew the short end with a straight stitch using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Press the seam open with an iron. Place the waistband right side together around the assembled shorts. The waistband and shorts will align at center back. The waistband should fit at a 1:1 ratio around the opening of the shorts. If using the optional grommet, place the grommets closer to the top of the shorts. If not using the grommets, the 3/8 inch memory fold will be further away from the top of the shorts. Sew around the circumference of the shorts using a straight stitch with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. As you sew on the waistband, ensure that all pockets are laying flat and all seam allowances are facing the correct direction to avoid any puckering or gathers in the fabric. We need to fully encase the seam allowance at the waistband. This will be done using your 2 memory creases as a guide. The seam allowance from sewing the waistband onto the shorts should be facing up. Turn the waistband up. Fold the waistband in half along the center memory crease and fold again along your 3/8 inch memory crease. The fold of the 3/8 inch memory crease should align with your stitch line from sewing the waistband onto the shorts. Be patient and precise with the placement of your pins. Check multiple times from both sides that you are pinning the waistband to the waistband, fully encasing the seam allowance from the shorts to the waistband. It should be a completely clean finish on the inside of the shorts. Starting at the back of the shorts, slowly and carefully top stitch around the bottom of the waistband with a 1/8 inch seam allowance using a longer straight stitch. Personally, I like to sew with the right side of the shorts up, but it is personal preference. Check frequently to ensure that you are catching the waistband on the wrong side of the shorts. Leave a 2-inch gap at the back of the waistband to feed the waist elastic through, using a safety pin or something similar. After checking the fit of the elastic and adjusting for personal preference, overlap the short ends and sew with a stretch stitch. Top stitch the unsewn portion of the waistband with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. For a faux drawstring, feed the cording through one grommet and immediately out the next. Shorten the drawstring to its desired length and burn or secure the ends as desired. The final step is top stitching your waistband to the elastic. We'll recommend using 2 equidistant stitch lines. Equally distribute the elastic throughout the waistband and quarter the waistband, placing pins at center front, back, and at the sides. Top stitch the 2 rows using a longer 4.0 stitch line. For a 2-inch elastic, these stitch lines will be 5/8 inch from each edge and 5/8 inch from each other. And with that, your Greenstyle Auckland shorts are done. We'd love to see your makes. Share and tag us on social media using the hashtag GSAucklandShorts. Happy sewing, friends!